Alright guys, BLM here. We are back with a new video. In this video I'll be going over the YuGiOh anime series and give my rankings of the entire series. And we'll be going over the 5 different series that have already concluded at the time of this recording, which would be Duel Monsters, GX, 5Ds, Zexal, and Arc 5. Now, I will not be talking about YuGiOh Zero, which was a 1998 Toei series, as that series only had 27 episodes and it really isn't considered part of the canon. I'll also not be talking about Vrains, as of the time of recording, it is not finished, and to be honest, I haven't even started watching it yet. I should also say this video will include some spoilers for all of these series, so if you don't want to be spoiled, don't watch this. Now, with that out of the way, let's get started. Alright, we're going to start off with the number 5 position. My least favorite YuGiOh anime series is YuGiOh Arc 5, which is the most recently completed series. As someone who watched Duel Monsters and GX as a kid, I know it's like a popular thing to hate the newest one, but I really don't like Arc 5. I just found the entire first arc of Arc 5 to be really boring, and when it wasn't boring, it was really cringy with some really weird characters, dumb plot lines, and really terrible dialogue. Now, it does get better once they start traveling between dimensions, and I really like the fan service in the series, where they had a whole bunch of cameos from previous characters from GX, 5Ds, and Zexal. But even then, the show is still a bit of a mess, being completely unfocused and having way too many characters for its own good. That being said, there are some really great ideas in Arc 5. The problem is that they weren't executed well. Having Yuya, the main protagonist, end up being a reincarnation of the main antagonist, and even becoming the main antagonist himself is such a great idea, but Zark was just so generically evil that took all the fun out of it. Also, having the final duel against Zark being a battle royale against almost every other side character in the series is cool, but it was executed in the worst possible way. By having 2 people taking on Zark at a time, with most of these people, you know that these people are just fodder for the more important characters that are gonna come later on. I also feel like the duels in Arc 5 are the hardest to follow, and also they're the least interesting to me. I never cared for the pendulum summoning mechanic, as I felt like it overcomplicated the game. I also didn't love many of the new characters that were here. There were a couple good ones, but for the most part, they were just retreads of characters we've seen previously. I never loved Yuya either. I don't think he's the worst character in the world, but I don't feel like he gets enough development, and I feel like he's kind of a mix of my least favorite elements of characters like Jaden and Yuma. Overall, I just don't care for Arc 5. While it isn't the worst anime series I've ever watched, I do feel like it wasted a lot of its potential. Now we're moving on to number 4, which is YuGiOh Zexal, or Zeo if you want to be technical. Now, while Zexal is number 4 here, I don't actually dislike the series. Now, like Arc 5, it does have a pretty weak first arc, for a lot of the same reasons. I mean, annoying characters, terrible dialogue, dumb plot lines. But like Arc 5, it does get better from there. However, unlike Arc 5, it stays consistently good until the very end. The second half of Zexal has some of the darkest themes in the entire series, with some really dark backstories. The last few duels of the series are probably some of the most ridiculous, over-the-top duels in the entire franchise, with Dawn 1000 having monsters with some of the most ridiculous effects in the entire series. This series does introduce XC summoning, which I do think is a healthy evolution of the game and allowed for some interesting game mechanics. The characters of this series are a bit of a mix for me, where I do like characters like Shark and Kite. I do feel like they're more annoying characters like Yuma's friends. I used to also really hate Yuma as a protagonist. However, I think as the series goes along, I do like him a lot better. I do think he gets some character development and gets put in some pretty serious situations. I don't know how to really feel about the Yuma and Astral relationship, as it's very obvious that they were trying to mimic the Yugi and Yami relationship, and to be honest, didn't do it nearly as well. But I do like the fact that they argued more, and I thought their final duel was a great conclusion to the series, though I don't think it's as good as another series we're going to be talking about very soon. Overall, while I really like the second half of Zexal, I don't feel like it ever reaches the peak that the other 3 series reach. And at the end of the day, it isn't as memorable to me, so that's why it's in the number 4 position. Alright, now we're moving on to number 3, which I do think some people would disagree with. But for me, number 3 is YuGiOh Duel Monsters, also known as the original series. Now, while Duel Monsters is a series I started watching as a kid, and the fact that it's obviously a classic series, I don't feel like it's the most consistent series. I used to love the Duelist Kingdom arc as a kid, but in retrospect, it really does disturb me in the fact that there's no real set rules, and it feels like they're just making things up as they go. Now, obviously, there were some really iconic moments throughout, There were also some pretty boring duels towards the beginning of the arc. Obviously, Battle City is one of the best arcs in the entire franchise, taking place over the course of 2 seasons, with probably even more iconic duels and moments than in the first season. But I do think the anime falters here by putting the virtual world arc in the middle of this arc, and while I do enjoy the virtual world arc more than most people, I do feel like it breaks up the pace of Battle City. The entirety of Season 4 is filler with the Waking the Dragon arc, which again I do actually enjoy despite its blatant plot holes. A lot of that being due to the fact that they further explore Yami's character. The final season for me is kind of a letdown, as I never liked the KC Grand Championship filler arc, as it's easily the worst filler arc in the series, and I've always felt that most of the Dawn of the Duel arc was pretty boring and dragged out until the very end, where we do get 2 of the best duels in the series with Yugi versus Bakura and Yugi versus Atem, which perfectly sum up Yugi's character arc while also providing some of the most twisty-turny duels in the series. Obviously, the characters of this series are very iconic, very memorable, though I do think upon further inspection, there are certain characters like Taya and Tristan who don't get as much airtime and as much development as what I would have liked. Though I still love characters like obviously Yugi, Yami, Kaiba, and Joey, and I do think that Pegasus, Merrick, and Bakura are great and iconic villains for the series. Overall, Duel Monsters is great with some of the most iconic characters, duels, and moments in the entire series, but I also feel like it's an inconsistent series, with Season 1 being a bit of a mess, and some of the filler arcs really breaking up the pace of the series, and a kind of boring final arc until the last few episodes. Now we're down to my final 2. The final 2 series I have here, obviously, are GX and 5Ds, and my number 2 series of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. And like Duel Monsters, this is a series that I did watch as a kid and one that I have a lot of nostalgia for, but when thinking about the series critically, there are definitely some inconsistencies throughout the series, just like Duel Monsters. Season 1 starts off pretty well with a decent introduction to a lot of the characters like Jaden, Cyrus, Crowler, Bastion, Chaz, Lexus, and Zane, and it does a good job at world building and setting up future storylines like the Abandoned Dorm storyline. I also really like the Shadow Rider arc, though some of the duels are definitely better than others. However, my biggest problem with the first 2 seasons is the fact that there's a lot of filler. And that really hurts the series' consistency, especially considering most of them are pretty mediocre. Season 2 is more of the same structure-wise, with a pretty good introduction to new characters like Aster Phoenix and Hasselberry, which leads to the Society of Light arc, which while not the best in the world, is a consistently good arc with a decent villain, Sartorius. Now seasons 3 and 4 is where the series really picks up and is really what makes me love the series. And what really elevates it above Duel Monsters for me is the fact that it really tackles some really dark themes here. Season 3 is mostly void of filler, focusing on telling a compelling narrative instead of focusing on the duels. Though it does have some slower episodes, especially the first few episodes after they return to the other dimension, the ending of this arc has some of the most consistently great duels all in a row. And just like the other seasons, this season introduces a lot of great characters like Axel Brody and Jesse Anderson, also having some fantastic duels. And it also expands upon Jaden's backstory, and along with the Supreme King arc, it really gives him more dimensions than his typical happy-go-lucky self. Season 4 is also fantastic, and while it does have a good chunk of filler, it's good filler that is used to finish up storylines from a lot of the side characters. And I also love the storyline with Darkness, which includes the Abandoned Dorm storyline from the first season, and has a really cool way of bringing back an old villain to make him the final antagonist of the series. The series has a great cast of characters, and while some of them do get left behind, most of them are able to get full story arcs like Jaden, Cyrus, and Chaz. Overall, GX is still not the most consistent series, but with seasons 3 and 4 being 2 of the best seasons in the entire franchise, and having a great developed cast of characters, I do have this at number 2. Now on to my number 1 series, which is obviously at this point YuGiOh 5Ds, which is a series I really adore, which is strange considering this is actually not one of those shows I watched as a kid. Now I've been talking about consistency throughout this video, and while 5Ds is not perfect, it is the closest we've gotten to that in my opinion. Season 1 is a really good introduction to this fantastic cast of characters in Yusei, Jack, Akiza, Leo, and Luna, and also does a brilliant job at world building through its display of the satellite and New Domino City, and also displays some pretty serious themes. Season 2 kicks it up a notch with the Dark Signers arc being one of the best arcs in the entire franchise, and having some of the darkest scenes in the series, leading to some really great duels and some great character development for pretty much everyone, giving every character a time to shine. Now, the biggest downside of this series is Season 3, which is pretty mediocre. While it does set up Seasons 4 and 5 and also introduces us to the final antagonist of the series, it is a complete mess from a writing standpoint due to a lot of problems within the production team and also some controversies going around, which ended up making most of this season filler or really drawn out, or just completely irrelevant, with certain plot lines starting here that never get brought up ever again. Thankfully, Season 4 picks it right back up, mostly comprising of the World Riding Grand Prix, which has some fantastic duels and sets up the events of the final season, which is Season 5, the Cradle arc, which is probably my favorite arc in the entire series, with 5 straight duels that are some of the best in the entire franchise, and with some really great payoff to all the setup that has come out previously. Then we get my favorite final antagonist in Zone, who has a really interesting backstory, and I think there's some twists and turns they do with him that I find really interesting. And then after Zone's defeat, 5Ds ends perfectly by giving us a few episodes to conclude character arcs and show the future of a lot of the members of Team 5Ds, and also gives us a great rematch between Yusei and Jack. What really makes this series my favorite, though, is the cast. I think the cast is just incredible, with Yusei being probably my favorite character in the entire franchise, and having a pretty perfect execution of a flat character arc. And then there's other characters like Jack and Akiza, who are also some of the best characters in the franchise, a lot of that being due to the way that they develop based on their relationships with Yusei. Overall, I really love almost everything about Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, from its incredible cast to dark themes to its fantastic final season. I don't think there is a series of Yu-Gi-Oh! That can beat 5Ds for me. So there we go, that is every Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime series up to this point and my opinions of them. In the future, I would like to do a more in-depth video on some of these series, in particular the first 3, as those are the ones I know the most about. But yeah, those are my rankings of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Series. Thank you for watching.